The 2/1 of a Stone Battalion was an infantry battalion of the Australian Army, formed as part of the Second Australian Imperial Force at the start of World War II. The battalion was deployed to the Middle East in early 1940 and subsequently took part in the early fighting in the North African Campaign, taking part in battles around Bardia and Tobruk, before later being sent to Greece in early 1941. A lightning German advance quickly pushed the Allies back and forced them to evacuate after a very short campaign, and the 2/1 of a Stone was landed on Crete, where they subsequently fought unsuccessfully to repel a German invasion in May. The majority of the battalion was captured on Crete, but the 2/1 of a Stone was subsequently rebuilt from survivors in Palestine and returned to Australia in early 1942 following Japan's entry into the war. They then fought 2 campaigns against the Japanese in New Guinea, fighting in the Kokoda Track campaign during 1942–43 and the Itape-Wewak campaign in 1944–45. Following the war, the 2/1 of a Stone was disbanded. History. Formation. Raised at Victoria Barracks, Sydney, on 16 October 1939 as part of the 16th Brigade of the 6th Australian Division. The 2/1 of a Stone Battalion was one of the first infantry battalions raised as part of the all-volunteer Second Australian Imperial Force at the start of World War II. Its first commanding officer was Lieutenant Colonel Kenneth Ether, a former militia officer. The colours chosen for the battalion's unit colour patch were the same as those of the 1st Battalion, a unit which had served during World War I before being raised as a militia formation in 1921. These colors were black over green, in a horizontal rectangular shape, although a border of gray was added to the UCP to distinguish the battalion from its militia counterpart. With an authorized strength of around 900 personnel, like other Australian infantry battalions of the time, the battalion was formed around a nucleus of 4 rifle companies, designated A through to D, each consisting of 3 platoons. After formation, a brief period of basic training was undertaken at Ingleburn, New South Wales, before the battalion embarked for overseas service on 10 January 1940, aboard the SS Orford, Greece and the Middle East. After sailing via the Suez Canal, the 2/1 of a Stone arrived in Egypt on 13 February. The battalion then moved to Palestine, where it concentrated with the rest of the 16th Brigade at Julis near Gaza. The entire brigade remained in Palestine until the end of August, when it moved to Egypt to carry out preparations for active service with the 6th Division. The battalion's first campaign of World War II was the advance from Egypt into eastern Libya in January and February 1941. On 3 January 1941, the battalion took part in the 1st Australian ground action of the war, spearheading the 6th Division's attack to capture Bardia. Striking from the west, the 2/1 of a Stone went in just after dawn, supported by artillery, armour and aircraft, breaching the wire defences in front of the Italian positions, establishing a bridgehead for the follow-on forces to exploit. Later in the month, the 2/1 of a Stone was once again in the vanguard when the 16th Brigade led the 6th Division's assault on the Italian-held port of Tobruk. Following its capture, the battalion was left to garrison Tobruk as the advance continued. It left Tobruk on 7 March, ultimately bound for Greece with the rest of the 6th Division amidst concerns of a German invasion. The battalion arrived in Greece on 22 March and was quickly deployed to the north of the country to resist the anticipated German attack. The battalion took up positions at Varia on the 7th of April, but the Allied forces was quickly overwhelmed and it was forced to withdraw south on the 12th of April, eventually being evacuated by sea from Megra on the 25th of April. Instead of returning to Egypt, the 2/1 of a stone was landed on the island of Crete, arriving the day after they were evacuated from Megra, and they were pressed in to defend the airfield at Retamo, where they joined the 211th Battalion. On the 20th of May, the Germans launched an airborne invasion of Crete. 2 battalions of German parachute troops attacked the airfield, and the 2/1 of a stone, by then under the command of Lieutenant Colonel Ian Campbell, was heavily engaged as they put up a strong defense during the Battle of Retamo. The Allied evacuation began on the 28th of May, but the message to withdraw did not get through to the 2 battalions holding the airfield, and they continued to hold until the 30th of May. At that point, though, they were overwhelmed as the Germans, having been victorious elsewhere on the island, were able to bring in reinforcements, including armor and artillery, and concentrate their efforts against the 2 battalions holding Retamo. As food and ammunition ran out, the 2/1 of a stone battalion was forced to surrender and its personnel became prisoners of war. The fighting on Crete cost the 2/1 of a stone heavily, with 43 killed, 64 and 511 captured. The losses on Crete represented the vast majority of the battalion's personnel, but by June there were about 70 men from the 2/1 of a stone in Palestine, some of whom had managed to escape after the fall of Crete and some who had been brought back there after Greece rather than landing on Crete. The decision was subsequently made to reform the battalion, rather than disband it. This was done by transferring 200 experienced men from the 16th Brigade's other 2 battalions, the 2nd and 2/3 Road, and bringing in 500 newly arrived reinforcements. In October 1941, after the 2/1 of a stone had been rebuilt, it was allocated to garrison duties, taking up the defenses in northern Syria, which had been captured from the Vichy French during the Syria-Lebanon campaign that had been fought earlier in the year. Japan's entry into the war in December 1941 resulted in plans to bring the 6th Division back to Australia to help bolster the country's defences, and, on the 10th of March 1942, the 2/1 of a stone embarked for home. During the voyage, the battalion was diverted to Ceylon to defend it from a possible Japanese invasion. The invasion never came, and the 2/1 of a stone battalion finally arrived in Melbourne on the 7th of August 1942. New Guinea. After only a short period of respite, the 2/1 of a stone deployed to New Guinea, arriving there in September 1942 just as the tide of the Kokoda Track campaign began to turn back in the favor of the Allies. The battalion subsequently joined the Allied pursuit of the withdrawing Japanese north towards the beachheads around Bunagana, and during the counter-offensive the 2/1 of a stone battalion were involved in the major battles at Eora Creek and then at Garari, followed by Sanananda between October and late November 1942. Heavy casualties were suffered by the battalion during the campaign, with over 60% being killed or wounded or evacuated sick. Subsequent to the Kokoda campaign, the 2/1 of a stone returned to Australia to rebuild. At this time they received a large batch of reinforcements from the 49th Battalion, a militia battalion that had fought around Sanananda before being disbanded. After the return to Australia, a long period of reorganisation followed, during which the battalion was converted to the Jungle Warfare Establishment, which saw its authorised strength fall from around 900 men to just over 800. Late in the war, in December 1944, they were then sent back to New Guinea to help round up an estimated 35,000 Japanese in the Itape-Wewak region. The campaign lasted until the war ended and saw the 2/1 of a Stone join the coastal advance towards the main Japanese base at Wewak along with the rest of the 16th Brigade. The battalion was finally disbanded in December 1945. During the war, a total of 3,491 men served with the battalion, of whom 263 were killed and 418 wounded. Decorations awarded to members of the 2/1 of a Stone included 3 Distinguished Service Orders with 1 bar, 15 military crosses, 7 Distinguished Conduct Medals, 28 military medals and 68 mentions in dispatches. Battle Honours. The 2/1 of a Stone received the following battle honours: Bardia 1941, capture of Tobruk, Mount Olympus, Bralos Pass, Retamo, Kokoda Trail, Eora Creek, Templeton's Crossing 2, Oivigarari, Bunagana, Sanananda Road, Nambat Ridge, Badagwa, and Horn River. Commanding officers. The following officers commanded the 2/1 of a Stone battalion during the war: Lieutenant Colonel Kenneth Ether, Lieutenant Colonel Ian Campbell, Lieutenant Colonel Tom White, Lieutenant Colonel Paul Cullen,